about making, like when you're generating the text, which was in the form of a diary, how much we were we're already thinking that actually that writing of a diary is some kind of like a product that you want to to use in a different medium in a way, because I mean that's for me a little bit like I cannot really position myself like what is actually a diary for you in a way, because it's from one side it should be something like very intimate, but when you use the text already thinking that there's kind of like a purpose for it, that you want to use it in some kind of like further work. How come then, I don't know, like this friction is for me is interesting, because then you, of course, you're trying to kind of shape it up in a way, so there is never, you want to kind of formalize your thoughts that you can then have to use them, so it's not, I don't know, like I would really like to hear your thoughts about like, this process of writing and as well using this text, which should be maybe something intimate or not, and then kind of like instrumentalizing this feelings, because
first to say that for me, like writing diary as an association with like flux or dairy, in the sense of this kind of letting it flow, this self-expression, which is like very from like posting on your Facebook wall kind of feeling. Like I need to say something, I need to write something, I have an idea, I hear a great song, like just kind of like taking the things out and putting it somewhere and creating like a project which sometimes I'm considering, sometimes I'm like, yeah, this is a really smart idea, which mostly these kind of ideas, they get into the trash because like their representation of it to myself already went through a lot of layers. So then by the time it could become a performance, it's like, it mostly dies by the time it gets there, you could say. So if I work more with this kind of looser approach of like whatever I'm doing has certain value, or it means something, or it doesn't mean, or it means nothing actually, then I start to just kind of produce work, and I kind of feel much more relieved of like this, oh my god, I wrote this thing down, and what does it mean socially, how people are going to think about me, and like all this kind of stuff, like, and just to kind of bring it a bit short, it's like, I don't know why I'm writing these things, but the limit I can put to myself is just writing something, and then going from there, you could say then it becomes very literally, or it's about executing text and formulating a sentence. So me fighting my ego in that sense, saying I want to be free, then saying perform I want to be free, not as a parody, as a direct representation of what I want to be free potentially might mean. There it becomes like, there I need to work with myself, because otherwise I can go back to the kind of safe place of like, being free could be interpreted in such a way, or it refers to this and this and this, but in my case, if I write it in a diary and I choose this as a sentence, then I'm sentenced to it, so how can I overcome myself there without bullshitting myself too much? And that's like, it's a bit in this kind of drawing, which I need to make clear because I made this drawing 2 days ago, but it's like you have a meta or a word, let's say the word imagined, then you have an arbitrary choice or the free choice, something you just do because of because. You get the realization of this, which then happens or is becoming. It has a performativity of it in that moment. It's already performativity, but in that moment the performativity is kind of exposed, you could say, like I'm not the only one seeing it there, or perceiving it there. The moment this happens, or the same moment that I start to write about this as this kind of articles and a book or a website or any kind of form, in that moment it goes already back into the imagined or in the conceptual phase. So I'm looking for this gap, this split second in between that you have an imagined or a concept, or what is my next word, and then when it's being performed, like this in between space there, and how many layers of interpretation call for me what I call safety or security or securization, like how many layers are there necessary to bring those things out, because it's not very romantic in that sense, I could say.
Related to that, my question, which I had in mind, probably becomes in another light, but I wanted to ask you about your entering to A class. Kind of, I remember you were in the beginning. You made statements. You wanna search for the antonym of terrorism.
Yes.
Used to say.
The what
You
terrorism?
use the antonym of terrorism to find kind of what is kind of the antonym of terrorism. Where are you with that in your trajectory of the research? Did it dissolve? Did it kind of merge into this work? Did it, because you don't make this a lot and you don't make this statement anymore? I didn't hear any. Where are you with that?
Yeah, I think after the last intro week, when we went to the room, then I felt I went very much towards this kind of terror state, or like. In the original proposition, I was rereading it and I refound like the keystones or like the markers, which for me are really the. After going into this kind of thing, I start to see clearly again like what it is that I'm actually busy with, and instead of like the antonym of terror, I'm looking for the act which produces love. The cause of love, because the act of terror causes fear in society and needs people to needs others to secure yourself if you don't address the own fears. But then like the act of love, and that's where I am right now. It's like figuring out like what causes this love to exist. So in that sense, the antonym of terror, like what is the cause of a society which craves for love instead of craves for boredom and anxiety. So yeah, that's what I'm looking for now. Like instead of trying to shock people, because it's something I read a while ago, is this kind of thing of like first it was misery, then it was boredom, and now it's anxiety. So when I was talking about terrorism and the lawful acts and the kind of formulation of a law which is countering anti-terror legislation, so a law which is formulating the elements for love to be a base of society and not fear or suppression or oppression, there is where I am right now. So I'm kind of looking for the, how to say, it sounds very stupid, but it's something we discussed before. It's like it comes from Slavoj Žižek, which was making a joke, and when he was asked, is there like a universal situation, or is there something which can be universalized? If it is not this kind of governance of fear or like this kind of... So yeah, then he replied like, yeah, it's the fuckability factor. It's like if there's one universal constant in any kind of human encounter or any kind of culture, then it will be two people entering, looking at each other and considering if or not they will fuck. If you take this seriously, because like that he made it as a joke when he was in America and it caused like, yeah, this is vulgar and blah blah blah. But if I take it seriously, I say like, how can you make an organization and you start to create picking orders and hierarchies based on like who's the first choice, second choice, third, blah, 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 and you go fully on this, you come into organizations which go much closer to the antonym of terror. Like instead of like, who's the one that you need to protect yourself from, it's like, who's the one you want to be with and who's the last one you would like to be with. And if this becomes precedence, then you start to create combinations which are very differently organized than the humanitarian or the humanist or the feminist or the different forms of... I wondered about it because sometimes I was in environments where, it's exactly about high school. It's like going to a discotheque where you're like super wasted with a lot of people, and suddenly you look around and you see that it's exactly the replay of the high school model of like the first time that you have the boys and the girls and the flowers on the wall, and then the person losing himself too much, so becoming ridiculous for dancing, like all this kind of social pacts, like...
All the rituals.
But then I wonder if it is the answer.
That's a different...
Yeah, but what you do is a bit more complex than just this. It's not just the fuckability. This is a good example, but I think it reduces what you do very much, because being with somebody is not necessarily, then it excludes people of a certain age. It's more complex. If two children are in the room, then...
No, but I'm really also... But that's for me the interesting thing, like it's a lot of transgression, like in adulthood. It's not about like innocence, happy together, or one. It's really not this. It's more like how do I deal with my own fears, with my own traumas, and how can I work from there. And I think like the fuckability factor is a key to actually open a door which is much more light and funny to consider. Like for me, more loving than to see like who's the first one that will fail or this kind of stuff.
I think we should close up. I forgot my cell phone, so I don't know what time it is. Is it, what's the time?
3:35.
3:35. Okay. So, great. I just want to ask, but we can also what to expect from you in the milieu. We will see.
Is that something you're going to ask everybody? What do we expect from you?
In his case. No, I think I just realized, why not in the milieu? Probably it might be helpful. That's probably also next week. We have a talk about kind of with what kind of approach everyone is kind of entering the milieu. Pretty awesome. Good.